Hey everyone, welcome to the 433rd episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And it's in the middle of summer, and it's kind of a slow news week, but we're going to still be talking about Amazon lowering the price for the maker of Roomba vacuums. We're going to be talking about why we need the cybersecurity label that we talked about last week, 2 weeks ago? I don't know.
Last week, yeah.
Last week, because I've just been getting a lot of questions. We've also got some big news on the LoRaWAN LPWAN front, and we're going to talk about a fellow reporter's mediocre experience with their smart home, and it's kind of what we've been saying all along. We've also got some news from Google, and we're going to be hearing from our guest, Adrian Dibvad, who is the CEO of Purple Air. We're talking about the air quality sensors that Purple makes. It's a fun history, and citizen science. So we'll talk about all of that. We're also going to hear from our sponsor, Wilderness Labs. And we tried something and it didn't work, so you'll hear about that as well. But first, a message from another one of our sponsors. This week's sponsor is Skyhawk. Skyhawk's portable remote IoT platform, or PRIOT, is the first battery-powered end-to-end wireless IoT solution that connects long-range sub-gigahertz RF sensors to the cellular cloud. It'll run for years on just a few AA batteries. PRIOT solves connectivity problems many IoT systems designers have faced, and it opens the door to new IoT applications. Check out skyhawk.ai to learn more about the portable remote IoT, or PRIOT, from Skyhawk. Okay, Kevin, is this big news? No. Is it the last week in July? Yes.
Yes.
So that makes it big news for today. I kind of felt like this would happen, but basically Amazon said it's going to pay 15% less from its original offer for iRobot, which is a company that makes Roomba vacuums. And the reason for this appears to be that iRobot's having a hard time selling robot vacuums, which is not surprising. Back when its April earnings were issued, I did a small news brief in the newsletter that was like, hey, iRobot's running out of cash. This is not great. And the other element that's at play here is a much more emboldened and active Federal Trade Commission. Mm-hmm. Lina Khan is contesting mergers left and right. She has lost 2 big cases, but she has also come after Amazon and other companies for other issues. And Amazon is very well aware that, Lina Khan wrote her entire, I don't know if it's a thesis, but she wrote an excellent and widely read, it's the reason she's the head of the FTC, article about Amazon's anti-competitive behavior. So the FTC had been looking at this deal, and I think Amazon was like, man, this is just going to be so much harder. You guys aren't selling as many vacuums. We're not really super excited about Madam A and the smart home at the moment. Let's not pay quite so much.
I think you hit the key points. And while the FTC hasn't resolved whatever they're going to do with this deal, and I have a feeling whatever they do, I have a feeling this is not going to happen. The European Commission is still looking into it for the same reasons that the US is. And I'm not surprised either about the need for funding, because I've had 2 iRobot Roombas. I think I had one of the original ones way back. And it was a very different time then. The market's totally saturated with these smart vacuums now. So, and iRobot is not known as the value brand, I guess, is probably the best way to say it. So
yeah, it's a fancy brand.
It is. It is.
And just to throw something extra here, the company that's behind the Nido vacuums, they actually pulled out of the market. It was a German company. They pulled out of the Vorwerk group. They also make the Thermomix, which is one of my favorite devices ever. I don't own one, but I would love to. They made this brand of vacuums, and then they were like, you know what? The market's not there. We're pulling out. I actually own 2 Roombas. One is a smarter Roomba and, whatever. The other one is ancient. I bought it in 2014. And then my newest one, I think we got it before the pandemic, which means they both still work. I have two because I have an upstairs and a downstairs and a dog. So that's...
Yeah, you're not replacing these things every few years. To be honest, obviously there are moving parts, but the main part that would need replacing or require replacement of the device is the battery, because there's only so many charges it's going to, hold its capacity. You can replace those.
Yeah, filters and the brushes, and we have a whole box of Roomba parts.
But what makes you replace a Roomba? Not the filters.
Oh, no. Oh, I was just thinking like that's an additional source of revenue if you buy the branded products.
Yes.
So I don't know. This deal is on the rocks, but iRobot is also on the rocks.
And also, just not to add more of a challenge to this, will the iRobot shareholders accept the lower bid? Aren't they going to have to?
Probably. I mean, I think so. They want to
sell it.
Sell it.
Get it out of here.
The other thing, there's also, I'll call it the looming specter of Matter on the horizon. And Matter doesn't support vacuums yet, but it does have an appliance working group that is looking at that. And what we're seeing on the Matter front is commoditization, which, we said we would see. This is not a surprise to any of us. But with Matter looming for robotic vacuums, suddenly if your vacuum can communicate with everything, maybe you just need that basic level and you could buy that from like Ecovacs or another Chinese brand manufacturer that supports Matter. And even with it supporting Matter, it'll get like basic security features too. So this is not great.
Nope.
So speaking of security, let's talk about the cybersecurity label, because I just thought everyone is like me, right? And they're all like, yeah, security is good and important.
Newsflash, nobody is like you. You're special.
And
I mean that in a good way. I do.
I'm a snowflake. But a bunch of people were like, Stacey, why do we need this program? This seems like a lot. And I was like, oh, I did not justify this program. So let's justify this program for y'all in case you're like, I don't know, Stacey, why do we need this? One, the focus on security came about after the Mirai botnet hijacked some, they'll call them IoT devices. It was really networked video camera systems that had a lot of bandwidth. And basically the Mirai botnet, the malware, hijacked a bunch of those systems, used their amazing broadband access and processing power to DDoS a bunch of sites. And suddenly everyone was like, holy cow, we're putting stuff on the internet that anyone can just grab, take over, and DDoS things. And DDoSing is basically, in this case, it took out Netflix on Christmas Eve, y'all. This was bad.
Yeah. You're basically flooding servers with requests to take them down, overwhelm them, basically.
Yeah. And so everybody suddenly was like, that's terrible for us, right? We don't want that. Netflix didn't want it. Amazon didn't want it. The US government was like, we don't want that.
Nobody likes a DDoS.
Nobody likes
a DDoS. I have a t-shirt that says that.
Really?
No.
Oh, I was like, huh. You too are a special snowflake.
Yeah. Thank you.
Stacey's like cluelessness aside. So that was reason number one. And that's why everyone was suddenly like, oh my gosh, we should probably think about security with these things. But other elements also happened. People were like, oh, look, I can hack this camera by, in some cases, it was things like, oh, look, I can physically turn off this camera that's like outside someone's house. A big popular thing was actually people resetting Ring doorbell cameras just by going up and pressing the reset button with the screwdriver, which then reset it and made your camera feeds, like they just went away, which, not great. And then other people were doing things like seeing open ports on Shodan and then guessing someone's password or using default passwords to log into cameras to watch like kids get undressed. And these things are still happening today. So there's a lot of elements here that people were like, So then big vendors were like, okay, we totally need to do this. One, because the government's going to get mad if we're part of DDoS attacks. Also, we as like companies don't want that weapon against us. And two, our brand is at stake because you don't want to be the brand that has weak security and then somebody can get into your customers' cameras and look at what's going on in their home because your customers are going to be like, yeah, I'm not buying that again.
Mm-hmm.
Those are kind of the big reasons this is happening. And you're like, Stacey, I don't care about any of that because I'm never buying a smart thing.
I'm going to bet somebody saying that might be in a certain age group.
Really? What age group do you think they're in?
I would say they're probably a Gen Z.
Oh, that's my kid. Yes, my kid wants nothing to do with smart technology.
Yes,
we established this before the show.
Yes,
Our survey of one.
Our survey of one, and that was kind of unscientifically to determine if this BlackBerry survey that Fast Company reported on was accurate, because it covers basically which generation is more or less comfortable with using IoT products. And hey, the baby boomers, according to this, are most trustful. Only 14% of the respondents did not want to have their IoT devices connected to the internet, but 44% of Gen Z and 42% of millennials have IoT devices not connected due to cybersecurity fears. So it's very interesting. And quite honestly, I mean, baby boomers are going away and everybody else is, going to be the next market for devices. So this has to be solved if this market's going to continue.
Yeah, and I've talked about this before. It's not just against hackers. This is also a privacy issue for a lot of the younger generation. And we talked about the Parks data that showed it's not number one, it's not number two, but it is the number 3 reason people don't buy connected devices. They're worried about not hackers getting access to their data necessarily, but manufacturers using their data. But you might be like, so I'm just avoiding smart devices. But I'm here to tell you I'm not going to say it's not going to be possible. That will become more difficult over time, which is why this label is important, because it doesn't force them. It's a voluntary program. But most of the companies making these devices, the big name brands that we're used to, they actually want to provide this level of security because they don't want to have their stuff become part of a DDoS that's used against them. They don't want the brand damage, but it costs money. And then when consumers are like, do I buy this one or this one? They're going to go with the cheaper one. And they might wonder about security, but they don't really think so much about it. This label will actually...
Maybe.
Well, yeah,
maybe. And look, just because there's one more data point here that's relevant from the BlackBerry survey.
Okay.
What percentage of each generation would pay more for a device that was labeled secure through the cybersecurity star labeling system? So maybe it's not the exact cyber trust thing that just came out, because this survey was done before that.
This survey was done in October when they first announced the idea. But yeah, so what did they say? They
said 55% of baby boomers would pay more for a device that had the label, 69% of millennials would, and 75% of Gen Z buyers would pay more if they had the label.
Okay, so there you go. So people will pay more with this label. But it also...
People say they will.
Well, yeah. But it also helps even the playing field for these. Like, it incentivizes them to work to security because now they can advertise that they're secure in ways that they couldn't before. So... I mean, these companies were already spending to do the basics on security, believe it or not. And with this label, they'll be, I guess, rewarded for it or credited for it. And then the other thing is, soon you won't be able to own or buy things that are not potentially connected to the internet. People, I don't think they're aware of this, but like in the appliance world, in the last year, LG, 80 to 90% of appliances they sold, it was possible for them to be connected to the internet. When I talked to like Kenmore and other brands, they were like, yeah, everything we make will be connected to the internet, because the advantages to a company are huge in terms of being able to diagnose things, in terms of being able to offer new services. So it's possible that you will only be able to buy connected appliances within the next 10 years. Or if you want an unconnected appliance, you might have to pay extra. I don't know.
Just having a connected device doesn't mean you have to connect it. And a perfect example is like a television. It's almost impossible to buy a non-smart TV these days, right? They're all just smart TVs at every price point. But you can turn off, say, the wireless network in your TV. We've done that.
Yes. You're not going to get certain features. And it's possible that going forward, like if you want to get diagnostics on something, if something breaks, they're going to be like, oh, hey, we can send a service technician out to your house for $250, or you can connect it to the internet. We could do the remote diagnosis. So then you might have to connect it and then unconnect it, which is something you could still do. And so I talked about appliances. 74% of TV households have at least one connected smart TV. That's because you have to have the internet on either a streaming box or your television to get streaming services. And that's gone up from 13% in 2013, which is the last 10 years, we've gone from 13% penetration of smart TVs that are connected to 74%. And that's data from Leichtman Research Group. So basically, this label is important because you're going to be buying more connected stuff. It helps manufacturers get credit for the security they're already putting into their devices. And it helps consumers make sure the things that they're buying have met some sort of security standard. So that's why this is such a big deal. All right, let's talk about LP WANs. Unibiz, which we talk about all the time. And next week, we're actually having the CTO of Unibiz on the show to talk about different LP WANs and how it's all going to fit together. They announced that they are going to collaborate with Semtech to bring Sigfox's LP WAN technology to Semtech's LoRaWAN networks and their LoRa Connect platforms. So what this means is, like in the US, Semtech has built out quite a significant LoRaWAN network. But while LoRaWAN's great, Sigfox has a slightly different technology. It's less data. It's much lower on the battery side. Everyone I know loves it. It's so much easier to connect things. And Unibiz owns the Sigfox technology. So this deal will help bring that Sigfox technology here to the US, where it could be used in places that, require batteries and lower data rates.
I suspect that after Unibiz purchased the Sigfox proprietary network, technology.
Yeah, they did the technology, and they have opened it up too, but yes.
That's where I was going. I suspect by making it basically open source, you'll see more deals like this because now it's not a closed off walled garden, basically.
Yeah. And Unibiz actually last week, it was in the newsletter. If you get the newsletter, you know this, but they joined the LoRa Alliance. So they're actually bringing this technology to the LoRa Alliance. Okay. So yay for the LP WAN news. Let's go back to privacy. Let's talk a little about AI. Let's talk about drones. So much. Okay, so this story feels like something I've been worried about for a long time. This is out of California, and this is a TV news story. So, part of me is like, ugh, but they did do the work. So let's talk about it. This is from the ABC News affiliate in California. A gentleman in the East Bay basically got his homeowner's insurance revoked because the insurance company used aerial photography. Now, he thought it was a drone. Actually, part of the insurance people told him it was a drone, but the insurance company came back formally and said it was aerial satellite photography, but was using an aerial view of his home to assess the potential danger, basically, of an event happening. And they decided his home was risky, and so they canceled his homeowner's insurance. And they canceled it because they noticed that there was
car parts and debris and other hazardous potential issues.
Yeah. Images showed, quote, debris that resembled wood and cardboard, a gray truck with debris in the bed, a tan vehicle with debris on top. So this is a gentleman who had apparently stuff around his backyard, and he was also restoring an old car. And he basically is running up against, I think, a pretty scary trend. And that trend is insurers right now want to dump people in quote unquote risky areas because it's expensive to insure their stuff. So and this is because of climate change. He's in a wildfire area. If you were in a hurricane prone area, you'd probably have similar things. And insurance companies have been using aerial satellite photography and drones to assess damage for years. And part of this is like to stop fraud, because back in the day in Texas, they were famous for this. After a hailstorm, a bunch of people would be like, your roof is damaged. We should file for insurance, even though your roof wasn't really that damaged. And the insurance companies would pay it out. So now they're like, let's check. Fraud. It's so bad for everyone. So in this case, though, my worry is we're going to get to a place where insurance companies want to dump people from their policies. They also now, because of computer vision and tools like drones and aerial photography, and honestly, a lot of connected devices that are tied to insurance companies in your home, it's going to be possible for them to radically assess electronically and very cheaply how much of a risk you are based on both the stuff that you may not, like a normal insurance salesperson or adjuster would not be able to see, and do it very rapidly and automatically.
Yeah. It's icky, quite honestly. The problem is you might be able to get some legislation passed that says that they can't go fly over everybody's home with a drone and go check for stuff.
They should fight that because that is a good fraud detection tool. I think what needs to happen is we need to start building out rules and regulations or laws that tell companies what data they can use so consumers are understanding how they could be harmed by this. It's basically, we'll call it AIoT, this array of better sensors and better, cheaper analysis.
Yeah, there's going to have to be rules because even if companies don't use drones, and I'm not saying this company did or didn't, there's so much satellite photography available to the public and or for purchase at an even higher resolution that the information's there and it's easy to access. So how do you control it, you know?
And it's not just drones. Insurance ADT has a deal with State Farm. Other insurance companies are putting smart devices in people's homes. Like right now, the insurance companies are not using that data to penalize you, right? They're just using it to, like, State Farm and other companies use a device called Ting that will monitor your home's electrical network for faults. And if it detects any sort of fault that might lead to a fire, it alerts you, and then they'll call an electrician, send them out to your home, and fix it as a way to prevent a fire because fires are catastrophic and damaging, right? And this works really well, but people are very concerned that what happens if they don't have the electrician come out? What if they want to do it themselves? What if this data shows that your network is too old to even have insurance? What if they just cut off your insurance because your electricity network is faulty? These are like legitimate worries. And take it further. Let's say that you have an alarm system through ADT that you're sharing that data with your insurance company. State Farm has created these kind of hybrid policies or hybrid plans that give you a discount for some of the ADT equipment. What if you have a kid that just forgets to set the alarm all the time? You know, is ADT going to cancel your policy? Especially if you live in an area where they don't want to be insuring people in anyway. That becomes an easy way to cut people off.
Yeah, it's an easy out. And the problem is there's no recourse for the consumer because once you lost a policy, it's highly unlikely, nearly impossible to get it reinstated.
Yeah, especially in some of these areas where they're just not selling new policies.
Right.
Okay, so enough about scary things. Well, is this scary? I don't know. Let's hear it. What's going on with Google and Fuchsia?
Well, for those who have been paying attention, not that this is a big deal, Google has been creating its own microkernel and OS called Fuchsia. And Fuchsia has been ported to several of its current and new smart displays and speakers. However, as of earlier this week, 9to5 Google has found out that Google has abandoned all work on moving Google Assistant smart speakers to Fuchsia. So is it a big deal? No, because Google has a capable platform that they use for their smart speakers and smart displays. This was just a change, so they're not going to do that change. But I'm more concerned with the fact that they're cutting something at all in their smart speaker division because they've already said we're not going to support third-party smart displays and speakers anymore. I think that was within the last 6 months or so. And now it's like, well, you're going to keep making them, right? And then this happens. And I just question again how committed Google is, a company with a history of dropping things when they don't make money. I just wonder if this is the beginning of the end.
It may be. That's sad.
Yeah.
All right. And then in this is kind of a fun, is it fun? It's not fun. It's a good story, though. Over at The Verge, reporter JP Tui, who's been covering the smart home forever, She's actually going to be a guest on the show coming up soon, too. Haha. Had a bad experience. Well, no, we'll say it's a bad experience, actually. She was on vacation with her family and got an alert from her smart thermostat that was like, we cannot cool your house. And she was like, oh no, but tried to verify, like, is my house really this hot? Or is there just like a weird thing happening with the sensor? Turns out other sensors in her house were also reporting that it was like 90 degrees there, which is not awesome. And she was a little concerned because she had a bunny hanging out in her bedroom, which luckily had a little mini split air conditioning that was still working. Yay, bunny. No dead bunnies in this story. So she did all the right things in terms of like, got an alert, there's a problem. Confirmed it with other sensors and stuff in the home because you never can be too sure. Turns out her HVAC was broken, but she couldn't do anything about it. She was on her way home, thankfully. So she was like, I don't know, do we fix it? Do we call someone to fix it while we're not home? We can let them in with a smart lock. Decided to waited, got it fixed, wrote the story. And basically, the moral of this story is she wanted her smart home to actually do something about it. She wanted it to be smart. Because right now it's a lot of notification. And this is what we've been doing for like a decade. We've wanted more than just eyes on the home. We want the home to do things. And it is getting better. Like our homes are getting smarter and my home will take action based on things I've told it to do. Things like Amazon hunches, let the home check in and be like, hey, I see that this is a situation arising that you might want me to take action. Do you want me to do it? And then you can say yes or no. So we're getting there in some elements. Like my hunches will do that with like my door locks. If I haven't locked my door and it knows I'm going to bed, Madam A will pop up and be like, hey, you want me to lock your doors? And I'll be like, thanks, dude. That's not exactly a verbatim translation.
I'm kind of surprised that none of the HVAC systems, or maybe some of them do, and I'm just not aware, monitor your system and will ping a tech and have them come out, because a lot of HVAC systems are outside anyway.
This is a business model issue. Way back when I started covering this, probably like in 2014, I talked to Emerson, and they have a HVAC business, or they had an HVAC business back in the day, and they wanted to make smart thermostats that would ping techs. The problem is the distribution system right now is, when you buy a thermostat, it may or may not come with your HVAC system. That's one. But if you buy everything together, then your distributor, the guys who install it and sell it to you, they don't necessarily want to have this sort of program in place. And if they do have this program in place, they may want to be like, okay, we're going to charge you like $10 to $20 a month to basically monitor this for you and let you know. And most people, when faced with the idea of like paying an additional $120 a year or $240 a year, are like, no, thank you. So we haven't found a way to monetize this that works for the distributors or for the consumer.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've never said that a smarter smart home would be a cheaper smart home. So I get that.
The IoT, so much promise. And really, the problem is no one can figure out how to make money on it. No one wants to pay what people want us to pay.
Yep.
My thought as a consumer is if my home is smarter, it should cost me less money. The manufacturer's like, if your home is smarter, you should pay me more for it. And you can see we're just running up against that. So.
Yeah. No, it's a tug of war. It's a tug of war. And interesting, the fix for this was $300. It took 5 minutes.
JP, don't listen to this part.
JP, I had the same problem last year, and I looked at my HVAC myself and saw that the capacitor was bulging and swollen, and that told me it was bad. So $45 later, I had my own capacitor, install it myself. So next time, check that capacitor.
Yeah, everybody out there, should I make Kevin do a how to repair your capacitor post?
Just ping me. Just have your HVAC system ping me and pay for the travel time, and I will fix your capacitor.
There you go. All right. Well, that's really all there is on the news front, and that was more explanatory than news. But now let's go to the section of our show where we hear from you. That's right. It's time for the Internet of Things podcast hotline. This week, it is sponsored by Silicon Labs and its Works With conference. This is the go-to IoT conference. There's 4 keynotes, 5 panels, and over 40 technical sessions on IoT. Works With is going to have something for everyone. This is a virtual event that will be held August 22nd through August 24th. And to register, go to workswith.scilabs.com. All right. If you would like to be on the show and have us answer your questions, or you just want to tell us something nice, you can call us at 512-623-7424. If you want to tell us something mean or pitch us, just don't. But if you call us, you will be entered to win this month's prize, which we're still in July. So you've got until Monday night to give us a call and you'll be entered to win the SwitchBot hub and 2 little SwitchBot motors. And this is just a fun little device that presses things for you. I feel like our DIY people will like this a lot. Anyway, so that's the prize for the month of July. Give us a call, 512-623-7424. And this week's question is from Spencer. And it's a lighting question, but it's a good one. Let's hear it.
Hi, Stacy and Kevin. My name is Spencer. I'm calling from Lehi, Utah. I have a question about smart bulbs and the Echo Dot routines. I have 2 children that share a room, and they always leave their lights on. And I'm curious if there is a way for me to automate the lights turning off after a given period of time with nobody in the room. I'm sure I might need a motion sensor or some sort of device that would be able to tell if there's somebody inside the room that would pair with the Dot and my smart bulbs. I appreciate everything you guys do and looking forward to an answer.
Okay, Spencer, midway through thinking through this answer for you, I was like so overwhelmed by like the amount of chaos that is trying to figure out the Internet of Things. Like both Kevin and I very quickly were like, oh, this is so easy. He can totally do this. And then I was like, oh, but it depends on what lights he has. Oh, and he's got the Echo. Does he want Matter? I would love for this to be local because, yeah. So then we went into a rabbit hole. So here's what we're thinking. There's a couple things. One, the Echo actually has, if it is a 4th generation Echo, like any of the round Echoes basically, they have an ultrasonic sensor on there that can be used for motion detection. So you might actually be able to turn that on, set up a routine with the lights that already are in your kids' rooms that work with the Echo, and that could work. Basically, you would set up a routine that's like lights out, and you would go to the routine segment, hit the little plus sign to add the routine, then go to smart devices, then go to the Echo Show. When you get to the Echo Show, you would turn on the ultrasonic sensor as your trigger.
And then whatever you want to happen.
Yeah, and there's a schedule option, so you could say after dark, turn out the lights, or you could just have it happen, whatever. The downside is I tried this multiple times, and it did not work for me. And I went into the actual Echo device to check, like, is my ultrasonic sensor not working? It was working. I turned up its sensitivity, the highest level. It still did not work for me. So your mileage may vary on that. But there are other options. And here's where we start getting into some weirdness. I think the best way, if you're going to do a motion sensor and light combo, is to have the motion sensor and the light be on the same system. So in that case, for me, it's Philips Hue and the Philips Hue motion system. And that's because when the internet goes out, because I have the hub in the home, they still talk to each other as long as there's power, right? And there's less latency in that system. That's my preference.
I would agree. I would agree with that, except I have had good luck with the Eve motion sensor with basically all the platforms because it has Matter. Not with Amazon. I haven't tried it with Amazon, to be honest, because it's a Thread device.
And we thought about Matter because Matter is awesome and it gives you that local control. So if your power goes out, but whatever your controlling device is still connected to power, it'll still function, right? The Eve Motion is a motion sensor that has Matter, and that's about $50, which is kind of expensive. But all of the branded motion sensors are kind of expensive.
It's a good device. It works well.
Yeah. And then you would just need Matter light bulbs, and there are Matter light bulbs, and Nanoleaf makes them, etc. Amazon does support Thread Matter devices now on the Echo. I don't know if it supports motion sensors yet, actually. That's an open question. We'll have to check on that.
Right. I mean, I know you can support non-Matter motion sensors on Amazon.
They're rolling it out. So they support light bulbs. They support smart plugs. I don't think they have announced anything with regards to sensors yet, but presumably they will after testing. Okay, that's one option. And your final option, if you're like, screw it, I don't care what platform, It can require the internet. The Amazon Echo devices have a Zigbee radio in them. And the Zigbee radios will work with other Zigbee motion sensors. And one that has really worked well for me is the Third Reality Zigbee motion sensor. This can be, it's like $17 on Amazon. It works with the Echo, so you could just spend that amount, set up the routine, and have that work for you in your situation. So, smart home still as impossible and complicated as ever. And
just to detect motion.
yeah.
Sheesh.
Well, to detect motion and do something with your lights. All right.
Well, yeah.
So, Spencer, I hope that helps you out. If you would like us to go through a complicated, long-winded explanation to do something simple for your smart home, give us a call at 512-623-7424, and you'll be entered to win our July prize of the SwitchBot Hub and 2 button pushers. Woo! And that concludes this segment of the show, but stay tuned for our guest, Adrian Divbod, who is the CEO of Purple Air. With wildfire season coming up, I know you want to hear this because this is all about detecting air quality, citizen science, and how to get the most out of your air quality sensors. But first, a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Wilderness Labs. Hey everyone, we are taking a quick break from the Internet of Things podcast for a message from our sponsor. And this week's sponsor is Wilderness Labs. And I have Brian Kostanich, who is the CEO, here to talk to us. To start us off, what is Wilderness Labs?
We're the creators of the Meadow IoT platform. Our mission is to make building and maintaining hardware as fast and easy as web or mobile apps. For years, if you wanted to build embedded hardware, you had to be an embedded hardware wizard. And then, once you got that hardware out into the field, it was difficult and expensive to maintain those devices. Meadow changes all that by providing both an enterprise-grade IoT device cloud that enables you to maintain any embedded device in the field, whether they be a microcontroller or an embedded single-board computer like a Raspberry Pi, as well as an embedded device OS that provides a premium .NET experience on microcontrollers. So with Meadow Cloud, you simply drop in a client library and you get secure over-the-air updates, cryptographic identity, crash reporting and logs, device health monitoring, and advanced data synchronization and forwarding to enterprise data backends such as Azure Event Hubs or things like DataCake.
And what makes Meadow stand out from other IoT platforms?
We're the only IoT device platform that offers modern .NET applications on embedded microcontrollers. So if you're a .NET developer or a .NET shop, it's the obvious choice because you can reuse your existing .NET skills to build hardware solutions. And with our device platform, you can cut your time to production in half. See, a typical IoT solution goes from idea to volume production in about 2 years. And with Meadow, you can do that in less than a year. And we're the only IoT cloud platform that gives you OTA updates and IoT services on any embedded devices, be it a microcontroller or an embedded Linux single board computer. So if you have a heterogeneous fleet of IoT devices, you can go from 1 to 1 million devices on the same cloud. So it brings enterprise scalability to every developer. And we focused on enterprise data integrations. So while Meadow Cloud provides device-specific services such as crash reporting and OTA updates, it really makes integrating into enterprise backends such as Azure or DataCake to build things like digital twins super easy. And of course, security is a primary feature on both device and cloud.
Okay, and do you have examples of companies using Meadow today?
Yeah, absolutely. We've really got a market wedge into critical infrastructure, industrial defense applications. So for example, in defense, the Navy uses Meadow for maintenance operations. They have digital twins that Meadow powers, and they can view real-time data on infrastructure and submarines. On the commercial side, we have folks doing solar-powered air quality monitoring at construction sites for EPA compliance. In industrial manufacturing, we have folks monitoring energy usage and equipment vibration for machine health so that they can provide preventative maintenance to prevent downtime and also energy cost savings.
So where can I go to learn more about Wilderness Labs?
Check us out at our website, which is www.wildernesslabs.co.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Adrian Divbod, who is the CEO and founder of Purple Air. Hello, Adrian. How are you today?
Hi, Stacey. I'm good. How about you?
I am excellent, and I am really excited to have you. I've had a Purple Air sensor outside my home for, I think, 2 years now, and I love it. I love being able to tell the air quality at a glance. I love the fact that I'm contributing to a larger database of local air quality. And this is especially important because I live in the West Coast and we're in wildfire season. So why don't you just get started and tell us a little bit about Purple Air and why you started it?
So Purple Air started about the end of 2015. I live in Draper, a place just south of Salt Lake City, Utah. And up on the mountain here where we live, there's a gravel pit. And it's a very windy place. And there was dust blowing out of the gravel pit every day. And I just wondered how much dust there is. There was no sensor that I could just go and get and set up, and there was no EPA sensor for like 30 miles away from here. And so I decided to build my own, having a background in computers and electronics. And then once I had the first few sensors, we sent some for testing, and we also gave about 80 of them away for free here in Salt Lake to measure the air quality, not just here where I live, but in the rest of the valley where we typically have bad winter inversion air pollution problems.
And before this, were you at all interested in air?
So I've always been interested in gadgets and making things and LEDs and these types of things. And I was working with computers and writing software and making little gadgets and stuff like that. So I have always had this technical background. But as far as air quality goes, I never really had too much focus on it until I was really affected by it in terms of the gravel pit. And I also thought here in Utah, where they have the word industry on the seal, that people would say, oh, you know, you live in a city, there's air pollution and smog because you can see this layer of smog over the city every morning. Get over it. You know, it's a city. But we found the complete opposite, that everyone cares about air quality. Everyone wants to know what's going on with it. And everyone wants to avoid poor air quality. Funnily enough, even people that smoke cigarettes.
Oh, that is funny. I guess, up until like probably 3 or 4 years ago, I would cook without turning my ventilation fan on and not think a thing of it. And now that I have indoor and outdoor air quality sensors, I'm like, oh no, what am I doing? So I guess invisible. It is invisible.
Yes, air quality sensors can change your life. They actually make you behave differently. Like you say, when you didn't think about it before, now you've got an air sensor in the house and you change how you cook. You don't burn stuff on the stove anymore. You use the lower temperatures and you really change how you do things.
It is true. So one of the things that I think is so interesting about measuring air quality is the fact that there's so many different ways to attack this problem. So if you're a government entity, you probably have these ginormous, very expensive sensors that like bring in air. They track particulate matter in a filter. They weigh the filter. There are like laser guided sensors, which is what y'all use. There are even, I don't want to say lower quality, I guess less granular sensors that I might use in a $50 air quality monitor for inside my house. So can you talk to me about how difficult it is to walk the line between cost and accuracy and what you've found over the years as air quality sensing has gotten more mainstream?
So, as you pointed out, there's many different methods. Classic sensors, which is the government sensors that were used by the EPA and other governments throughout the world to measure air quality and record the results of things like legislation and vehicle emission standards and stuff like that. Those are scientific instruments. They're huge. They're very expensive. They're loud and they take a lot of calibration. And if you're in court and you're saying this air quality data means something, then the court's going to say, well, can you show me why it's accurate? Who calibrated it? Where are those logs? And so the new generation of low-cost sensors are really aimed at supplementing that data, being able to tell, should I go riding today? Should I let the kids outside? Those types of everyday decisions. As you say, there's a lot of different types of sensors now. It's become, you use the word mainstream. And as a result, there's a lot of flashy marketing. There's stuff that's got displays and color and all sorts of things that they're trying to attract you to come in and buy their device. So I think that, you've got to be really careful that you're not getting a sensor that is not performing well. if you get a temperature sensor and it's telling you that it's cold outside and you put your jacket on and you go outside and it's actually really hot, you'll learn to distrust it. And that's what actually happened in the air sensor industry, where there was particulate sensors that came out that weren't really reading the air quality. They were reading it was biased with temperature and stuff like that. And it caused a bit of a distrust of low-cost sensors. And those sensors are still around. It's just harder to tell where they are and which ones they are. But it's important to look at the results of evaluations, studies like by the South Coast Air Quality Management District in their program called AQ Spec. And there's a bunch of other testing facilities that do similar kinds of tests on low-cost sensors to show you which ones perform better and which ones don't perform at all.
Okay, so if these devices are good enough and they're out there in sufficient quantity, what was it that made the EPA feel comfortable pulling in your data?
That's a great question. Throughout Purple Air's history, we never set out to approach the EPA or to approach Google or any of these organizations. They came to us, and they came to us over time. And they also came to us and formed a relationship over time. So we were talking for a long time. They were monitoring us for a long time. They were looking at the data for a long time. All of that ended up with them saying, okay, we're going to consume the data. And it also was a result of openness of Purple Air. We share how we do things. We also did not say to anyone in the very beginning, here's some data and it's great quality air quality data. We said, here's some data and we don't know what this means. It looked interesting to me because I had 3 sensors on my table all reading the same values and trending with each other. And that was an interesting phenomenon. So over time, we just kept building sensors. They kept on being tested. For instance, the 3 sensors we tested with the AQ Spec program in the beginning came up with an R-squared or correlation score of 0.97 with federal reference methods. Now, that doesn't mean that the highs and the lows match the highs and the lows of the federal reference methods, because that's called accuracy. And the accuracy of a sensor is if the federal reference method is reading 100 and you're reading 130, but you've got a very high R-squared, now you can create a formula that converts your data into a number that would look like the federal reference method. And that's the key. So a high R-squared means that you can convert the data using a formula to make it look like the federal reference method data, and that's important. We did those 3 sensor tests with them, and then the universities started becoming interested. And the universities would say, okay, we want to duplicate their tests. So they would take a couple of sensors. They would repeat the same kind of test where they ran them, what's called co-locating them next to federal reference methods. And they would verify those results. And then they would take more sensors from us and do community studies and the actual work that they wanted to do. And this kept happening. Each time that another university took the sensors, tested them, and did the correlation, it would be the same results as South Coast had. So our network just kept growing. We got bigger and bigger until the point that the EPA could not ignore Purple Air, because firstly, they were getting a lot of phone calls from the public saying, your sensors are reading this. Why is Purple Air reading that? Your sensor's offline. Purple Air is telling us this. And so they started studying our network. They started talking to us and researching what it was all about. And then after that, Google, saw the EPA's involvement, and then Google started working with them and with us to come out with a way of processing our data to make it look like federal reference methods.
Yes, and that's important to note that air quality is an index. So the number you're seeing is not necessary. And I will also note for anybody who has air quality sensors at home or anything like that, not everybody uses the same index or scale. So you might get, yours obviously is getting matched to the AQI, which is one type of index. But like my, aware sensor or the sensor on my air purifier may have a 1 to 100 scale, and it's totally different. So that's for consumers, it might be a little bit wacky to think about.
That's a really good point. And you must understand that the air quality indexes throughout the world are based on standards in each of those countries that they believe has an impact on human health. Some countries differ, like India versus The US is completely different scales. The base reading from sensors is generally in units called micrograms per meter cubed, which is the actual, because you mentioned earlier gravimetric, where they suck air through a filter and weigh the filter. They would weigh the filter before, they would suck air through it for 24 hours, and then they would weigh the filter afterwards. And they would say, okay, we have 50 micrograms of particulates. We sucked this much air through the filter. Therefore, the micrograms per meter cubed is 2.6. And so they would physically weigh it. Now, they then said, okay, the effect on human health at this microgram value is this over a period, and they came up with a standard and they called it the AQI. So as you point out, those AQI indexes vary based on which country you're in, and we also provide a whole lot of them on the map that you can actually choose from, and you can compare what does India think about your air quality, what does the UK think about it, what does the US think about it, even Australia and other places. So we've got a whole heap of different AQI standards that you can compare.
All right, let's talk about citizen science, because to me, none of this would be possible without the fact that IoT has made sensors so much cheaper. Cloud computing has made the ability to get data up in the cloud, store it, and display it in some fashion cheaper and marginally easier. I love the idea of individuals being able to have a concern about something, measure it, and then have actual data they can present to maybe their elected officials or just in their own lives to take action on that data. And I'm really curious if you thought Purple Air would become as big as it is and as impactful as it has become.
I must say that took me by surprise, if you like. Just like in the beginning when I thought people would say, oh, it's air pollution, you live in a city, get over it. Instead, they adopted the network, they deployed the sensors, they helped build it, and they really care about it. People are really excited about being able to take part in collecting air quality data. And you also mentioned city councils, for instance. If you go to them, now, if you go to a city council and you have one data point and you say, oh, look what happened last night to my air quality, the city council will say, okay, fair enough. You think you experienced something. Were you smoking a cigarette around the corner? Did you have a barbecue going? They won't know what to think about it. But when you come to them with 100 data points from all around the area and trends over years, and also the fact that the EPA consumes the data, that there's all of these studies on the sensors, it becomes a lot more compelling, and they can't ignore you anymore. One of the things that happened is that a particular city council had someone present them with data, and they kind of shrugged at it, and they were like, yeah, okay, whatever, it's Purple Air data. And then the statement was made that, oh, and by the way, the EPA uses Purple Air data. And all of a sudden, the city council was like, okay, wait, maybe we have to look at this a little bit more. So it really helps that you've got this adoption, that you've got this widespread use of it, that you've got so much data. And, the federal reference methods are calibrated heavily by scientists every year and multiple times per year in some cases. And they're big, expensive machines, and they produce ultra reliable data. So our way of dealing with that, or being the equivalent of that, is just sheer numbers. When you've got 1,000 sensors around an area like the Bay Area, in San Francisco, it's very hard to deny that the sensors are working. For instance, you can tell this one sensor seems to be weird. It's reading completely different to all the rest. Let's just ignore that because there's something wrong with that sensor, or there's some kind of local pollution source that we want to ignore that data. So it's just by the sheer volume of data. And IoT and the modern sensor networks that people can take part in make people excited. I remember the Weather Underground and their personal weather station network was the first kind of network of that type back in the 90s. And it was really exciting to see that and to think, man, I could take part in that. I could put my sensor on here and connect it up. And it was kind of a bit different back in those days because the internet, you didn't have Wi-Fi and it was harder to connect the sensors. But it was like the coolest network. And I kind of can't believe that now I have one of the coolest networks that even the Weather Underground consumes our data. So, they use Purple Air data as well. It's really an honor. And to see the adoption and the community grow and how we're helping people on all sort of ways, deciding when to go cycling, helping them to decide which direction to go during the catastrophe, which is the wildfires, helping them to manage their children's asthma better. We get told things like that too. We're really humbled and honored to be in the position we are, and it's our users that have put us here. It's everyone that hosts a sensor. It's you. It's all of your listeners who look at the map, who purchase sensors and contribute to the data set and share with each other.
Oh, I feel so ennobled by participating. And let's talk briefly about some of the options out there, because I have one of the, I don't know if it's an original, but I have, looks like a little sterno can. It's out there. Now y'all have the one I wish I had bought, which is the Flex. So and that allows you to actually replace the little laser sensor mechanism. And then you also have a new product that looks really user friendly called the Zen that you can stick outside, and it just has this cool LED light that's like, you can go outside, which saves me from having to go inside the app and be like, is it green? Is it purple? Is it awful? Can you talk about your array of products? And if you were buying one, which one would you get?
Okay, so the question about replacing the laser counters, the sensors might last 2 years, but some of them have lasted a lot longer. They've lasted several years. We still have some original sensors that were deployed in 2016 out there, but it really depends on the data. If you get an insect in there or something happens to your sensor, or you live in a particularly dusty environment and there's always dust blowing around and getting in there, then it's going to reduce its lifespan. Any of our devices can have the laser counters replaced.
Okay, so thanks everyone for listening to this week's Internet of Things podcast. I really appreciate it, as does Kevin. And if you want to find out more information on the Internet of Things, you can find it at my free weekly newsletter that comes out every Friday. You can sign up for that at www.staceyoniot.com/newsletter. Or you can just visit the website for all of those stories published a little bit
As you
later.
say,
Thanks
the
for
new
listening,
versions
and
are even
have
better.
a great
It makes
week.
them easier to replace the laser counters. On the Flex that you mentioned, the Flex is intended for more of an industrial kind of use where you want to put it on the side of a school or something like that. You can put it on the side of your house too. You can also put it inside your kitchen. It doesn't matter. Any of the sensors can be used indoors, but some of them can't be used outdoors just because of their design. And then our new devices called the Zen and the Touch are a little bit nicer looking. And if you have the Zen outside your kitchen window, for instance, you can look at it, as you mentioned, the LED strip that makes the whole thing glow. And you can tell the air quality just by looking at it. Now, in addition to that, the Touch and the Zen has got this tap feature that you can tap the sensor and it will adjust the brightness.
All right. Let's say I have these sensors. I do. But let's say I haven't installed them yet. What is the best way to install them for the most accurate reading?
So we try not to give too much guidance on where to install them. You want to install it somewhere away from obvious sources of pollution, like your dryer vent or right near your barbecue or something like that. But at the same time, if you've got a barbecue and you're using that, the smoke could go around your house to anywhere that you might have the sensor mounted, depending on the wind. And that's why when you look at the network overall, some sensors are showing something, and that's a single point, and then you can think, wait, there's someone smoking a cigarette or barbecuing or something like that going on, or a restaurant with a chimney. So we tend to suggest that you should mount it somewhere that's convenient, somewhere that's near outlets for power, and somewhere that's within range of your Wi-Fi. If you consider that we don't give too much guidance on where exactly to mount the sensor, but when you look at somewhere like the Bay Area and how even the readings are across the area during wildfire events and other sort of more subtle smoke events, you know, the different places, it's on a tree, it's on the back of someone's house, it's under someone's deck, it's up on the roof, it's all these different mounting locations don't seem to produce too much different data. So the moral of the story, I think, is just get it out there, get it mounted, get it in Wi-Fi range, and start collecting data.
Excellent. Yes, I have where I live, I have one sensor that's always green, even during wildfire events. And I am like, where is this sensor? And I suspect it is indoors. So it's nice that there's enough sensors out where I live that I'm like not fooled. All right.
Now, that's what I was saying earlier about the numbers, because when you've got a whole lot of sensors telling you something and one of them is in disagreement, you can tend to dismiss that one. And also, if you're looking at a sensor like that and you think to yourself, hey, this sensor looks like, I think it's indoors. Look at the temperature. If you look at the temperature readings and you see that they're solidly sitting at 76, you can see that the temperature is even and all the other sensors' temperatures are going up and down with the daily cycles. So that's one clue as to whether it's incorrectly marked. And the other one is if it's reading all zeros, the fan could have failed and it's not actually drawing air through it. In either of these types of situations, you should feel free to email contact@purpleair.com with a link to the sensor. Say, hey, I think something's wrong with the sensor. Can you look at it? And we'll do that. We sometimes will correct this classification from outdoors to indoors if that's relevant. We'll sometimes notify the owner, hey, your sensor needs to be replaced. And in extreme cases, we'll even remove that data point off the map so that people using Google, for instance, nowadays don't see this, in some cases, terribly high reading. And they call us and they're like, wait, Google is telling me that there's this terrible thing going on and I don't believe it. So we'll help by removing those sensors as well.
My gosh, I'm going to become a Purple Air informant. Oh no. All right. Well, Adrian, thank you so much for coming on the show this week.
Stacey, thank you very much for having me.